Over the last few months, and heck, even over the last year and a half since the Kraken started playing games, we've had a lot of fun talking about franchise firsts and franchise records, even and sometimes especially the ones that are somewhat silly and mundane in the grand scheme of things. Because what the heck, you only get to start a franchise once. Unless I suppose you're a Winnipeg, Minnesota, or maybe even an Atlanta fan, rest in peace. But what if I told you this time, we have an NHL record in Seattle? What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken take care of business in Chicago, defeating the Blackhawks 8-5, with a fitting 8-goal game, their fourth of that kind of the season, to finish off their 8th win in a row. And in so doing, winning all 7 games of their 7-game road trip, becoming the first ever team in NHL history to win the first 7 games of a road trip, or sweep a road trip of 7 games or more. Now, yeah, there's not a ton of 7 or more game road trips that happen in the NHL, but the Kraken are the first ever to have one and win every game of it. And as if that wasn't impressive enough, this, while it was a road trip that ended in Chicago, wasn't one that featured a bunch of teams competing for the first overall pick. In fact, it was a road trip that not only featured the Kraken for the first game of it, defeating the best player in the world, they also beat the best team going right now as well, which for those that are new here, were 2 different games. So while normally I wouldn't be this excited about the Kraken beating the worst team in the league, or at least the one that's currently bottom in the standings, and especially considering this was a game that was far from perfect for the Kraken, considering that it was the exclamation point, at least at the end of this road trip, hopefully not the end of the winning streak, but at least the road trip winning streak, I think it's fair to be this excited about the game regardless of who the Kraken played. Because if we're being honest, this isn't excitement about just this one game, it's excitement about this road trip and just how this season continues to go for Seattle. Now, with that having been said, we should probably actually get to this game because for the 5th time this season, there were double-digit total goals in it, so yeah, there's a lot to get over in this one. I will say that coming into this game, in spite of how things looked in the standings and even how they looked by the end of the game, this was one that kind of felt like there was reason to be nervous as a Kraken fan going in. They're coming off of being the first team to ever beat Boston, well, ever, at least this season, beat Boston in regulation at home. So then to immediately 2 days later at the end of a 7-game road trip play the worst team in the league after beating the best, it did kind of feel like a trap game. And I'm sure Seattle fans weren't feeling too great about how the Seahawks game went. Though I suppose as far as that's concerned, like the Kraken, it was just a great season for the Seahawks to even make the playoffs in the first place. Still, it wasn't the best feeling coming into this game. Certainly not helped by the fact that we learned just before the game that Schwartz was going to be a scratch in it. Which, considering how last season went for him, hopefully this doesn't turn into more of a thing. He certainly wasn't a healthy scratch. Maybe it was just a veteran rest kind of day, but it has nothing to do with how he's been playing lately. In fact, he's been one of the more underrated players in the Kraken so far this season. I think largely because he hasn't had the big burst of points production that we've seen from McCann or Beniers or some of the other guys. Instead, he's kind of just been steady Eddie, really doing pretty well, but not necessarily huge standout games in the top 6 role all season. The good news there, at least, is that the Kraken still have plenty of depth, and considering they've been having to scratch either Donato or Geekie every game, it was pretty easy to just put Geekie back at his normal center spot on the 4th line and put Donato in Schwartz's normal spot. And plus, as the game gets started, all those nerves are eased pretty quickly, as less than 3 minutes into the game, well, it did take the Kraken a while to get their first shot on goal. At 2 minutes and 50 seconds, that first shot goes into the back of the net. It's Daniel Sprong set loose on a breakaway, or at least partial breakaway chance, in the neutral zone by Tanev. He gets all the way through the offensive end, and instead of firing off a shot with that cannon of a shot that he has, he just wraps it right around Mrazek and into the back of the goal to give the Kraken, again, that early 1-0 lead, which is something that is usually a pretty good indicator that they'll end up winning the game, as they've only lost twice now so far this season and only once in regulation when scoring first. And as far as scoring first is concerned, they have been doing more of that this season, certainly than they did last year, and more than they haven't. So once again, from his role on the 4th line with the first shot on goal for the Kraken in this game, which this would become a bit of a theme as we would see over the rest of the first period, Sprong gets his 14th already of the season. Now, granted, a lot of that also comes from the power play, but still that's a ridiculous number for any 4th liner, even regardless of power play action. Unfortunately, that lead would be wiped off the board just under 2 minutes later, as the Blackhawks respond right back the other way, as Taves finds Jones on the far side of the net. That being Seth Jones for the Blackhawks. And while this pass is intended to go off the stick of Jones and into the net, it ends up going off Alexiak's stick before it gets to Jones' stick and then into the back of the net. So it ends up being Taves' goal. Seth Jones ends up getting no part in it, but it is a 1-1 game either way. And as far as Martin Jones, who's back in goal for the Kraken, is concerned, it's the first goal that he's let up in, well, quite a while, over 2 games at this point. And although the Kraken do try to respond right after this goal goes in, trying to get the lead back immediately, the game would stay tied right up until about the halfway point of this first period. And that is when things start getting really crazy. First, at 9 minutes and 30 seconds, Vince Dunn gets a puck up to Matty Beniers, really just trying to keep it in the offensive end as Beniers has it up by the blue line, right in the middle of the offensive end. And Beniers just decides to fire off a shot, looking for a tip from Burakovsky next to the net. He, I guess, doesn't end up getting the tip from Burakovsky, but it goes off of something and into the back of the net past everybody to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead, and Beniers his 16th of the season. Is that right? 17th of the season. I'm sorry I don't have a better screenshot for this one, but this was the best look I could really get with both Beniers and the goal both in the same shot to see that, well, there was a tip, and honestly, I still don't know how this didn't go off Burakovsky into the net. Either way, the Kraken still have the 2-1 lead, and I think we're all pretty happy that Beniers gets another goal. 1 minute and 16 seconds later, at the 10:46 mark in this first period, the Kraken get a 2-on-1 break. It's McCann and I think it was Donato, but it doesn't really matter who. The Blackhawks had a breakdown in the offensive end for them that allows this breakaway to happen. McCann gets the puck, and while there is the one defenseman, he doesn't really ever come over to challenge McCann. So McCann, with I think all the Kraken Nation shouting from wherever they were at, shoot the puck, listens, fires off the shot from the right faceoff dot, and beats Mrazek to give the Kraken the 3-1 lead, and McCann his 20th of the season. So just barely under a 40-goal pace at this point in the game anyway, but he would get past that as we go on. A minute and 22 seconds after that, the Kraken are back in the offensive end. Once again, it's the first line, and this time, honestly, this is one of the best goal-scoring plays I think we've ever seen from the Kraken, going all the way through last season, through the entire short history of the Kraken so far. I know it's going to get lost in an 8-goal game and a run of goals that the Kraken put up here in a pretty short window, but this play was absolutely dirty from start to finish. First, it's Eberle with the puck along the boards. He gets a spinning play and a pass out to Beniers, who's coming through the offensive end and has Connor Murphy draped pretty much all over him, so he has no chance to get this puck on net, with Murphy between him and the net and on his back. So Beniers decides to just try to get a pass off, and somehow, some way gets an absolutely nasty pass, backhand around Murphy, backwards, maybe even no look to Burakovsky, who's then wide open in the slot, and Burakovsky skates up and roofs it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 4-1 lead. And again, although it may get drowned out by everything else that happens in this first period and in this game, one of the prettiest plays and goals we've ever seen in Seattle. Well, for Seattle anyway. It was in Chicago, but you know what I mean. It was a goal so nasty, in fact, that it ends up getting Mrazek chased from the game. Granted, at this point, he has allowed 4 goals on 5 shots, but it's hard to blame him for a couple of these. A couple of them were his fault, but still, the Kraken chased yet another goaltender on this road trip, and, well, things didn't go much better from here for the Blackhawks. At this point, just in case you or anybody else was feeling a bit impatient and that this rate of scoring for the Kraken just wasn't fast enough, well, they only wait 37 seconds to score again. This time, it's just a nice transition play through the neutral zone as Bjorkstrand gets it out of the defensive end all the way across to Gord. And if you go back and watch the highlight package, at least the Sportsnet one, it might also be on the official NHL website, but the highlight package from this game, you can hear, I'm pretty sure it's Gord yelling at Tolvanen, "Yeah, go, go, go." And that's what Tolvanen does as he splits the 2 defensemen who are kind of caught on their heels on the blue line. Gord gets the pass up to Tolvanen, and Tolvanen does the rest, burying it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 5-1 lead, and getting him his 5th goal already for the Kraken in 8 games. So total then, that's 7 points, 5 goals, and 2 assists for Tolvanen since starting his Kraken career during this winning streak. All right, so our starting goaltender gave up 4 goals on 5 shots, and now the guy that we put in to replace him just let in a goal on the first shot on him. All right, timeout, time to take a timeout. We got to take a breather here. I mean, if you're Chicago, it makes sense to take a timeout here, I guess, but it didn't help him any. Wait, What do you mean 37 seconds between goals isn't fast enough for you? I mean, come on, your hand still has to be red and raw from all the high fives you've been giving out here over the last few minutes. But, alright. 26 seconds later, the Kraken do it again, and once again, it's Jared McCann in the offensive end. This time they're kind of set up, but it's McCann standing all alone in the right faceoff dot, the same place as last time, fires off a shot right through the 5-hole of, well, this time it's Staylock, and into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 6-1 lead. Mercifully, for the Blackhawks, this is where the Kraken onslaught would come to an end. At least for now anyway. But it does come with the Kraken having scored 6 goals on their first 7 shots on goal. And not just that, but putting those 6 goals up faster to start a game than any team had done it in the NHL since the Sabres in 2006, when they did it in just under 12 minutes. And not just that, but the fastest to do it with all 6 of those goals being at 5-on-5 since the Kings in 1981. And they only did it 19 seconds faster than this Kraken team. Now, I specifically bring up that they were all 5-on-5 goals, not just because it leads to that incredible stat of it not happening since 1981, but also because the Kraken would get a pretty good chance to expand on this already 6-1 lead with a double minor penalty in the final minutes of this first period. So once again, it's Bjorkstrand who's left bleeding from the face as he takes another high stick. At this point, Bjorkstrand getting hit so frequently in the face and left injured that he might just consider wearing a goalie mask out there. But either way, the Kraken do get 4 minutes of power play, which they are not able to score on. So we do get to the end of the first, with the score still 6-1. Now, I will say in defense of the Kraken power play here, well, again, they don't end up scoring with 4 minutes of a man advantage, where immediately prior to that, they scored 5 times at 5-on-5 in less than 4 minutes. They do at least get a number of shots off on goal and scoring opportunities. Just the Blackhawks, I guess, finally decided to start playing, well, goaltender for one thing, but also defense. And besides, well, the Blackhawks as an organization might deserve it. You don't want to rub it in too much to the players and fans, if for no other reason than our old friend Colin Blackwell's on the team, and we like him. Plus, at this point, the game's pretty much over already, right? Or at least that seemed to be the attitude that the team had, as they kind of just coasted through the second period and really didn't seem all that inspired to make much of anything happen offensively. They didn't necessarily play terribly defensively either, aside from one gaffe, but I certainly wouldn't say that I felt a sense of urgency from the team by any means. Although I suppose that's kind of fair. You're up 6-1 on the 7th game of a long road trip. So yeah, why not? That having been said, there may have been 2 players for the Kraken that might have wanted to try a little bit harder to be at least part of one more goal for them. And I say that because after the end of that 6-1 first period for the Kraken, well, plus minus isn't my favorite stat. In fact, it's one of my least favorite ones. And generally speaking, I don't think it really has much place as far as a largely talked about stat. It does every now and then offer at least amusing anecdotes, if nothing else, where at the end of the first period, or I guess at the end of the scoring of the first period, the Kraken had 2 defensemen, those being Larson and Dunn, who were +6s, which, of course, on the flip side, does mean, and I almost hate to bring this up because of how well that first period went, that there were 2 defensemen for the Kraken that had a -1 after a 6-1 period in their team's favor. That being the pairing of Alexiak and Schultz. It's an unfortunate stat for the 2 of them that, honestly, I probably wouldn't even have bothered bringing up, and just would have left it at that Larson and Dunn were +6s, and for that matter, everybody on the forward end had a point at this point in the game. If it wasn't for the fact that when the Blackhawks do score about halfway through the second, it's that defensive pairing that's getting beat again. This time it's Schultz as Isaac Phillips for the Blackhawks pots his first in his NHL career, making it 6-2. And once again, Schultz and Alexiak a -2 in a 6-2 game that their team leads. Now, this goal from Phillips was a pretty nice backhanded goal that he scores on, and Schultz is right there on top of him, making it pretty hard for him to get the shot off, so I don't necessarily think that it's really their fault, and there's 3 other players on the ice, not to mention the goaltender, that also could have helped stop this play from happening anyway, which is a large part of the reason that outside of big outliers, I don't think plus minus has too much value. Regardless, we do get to the end of the second period with the score still just 6-2, though the Blackhawks are on a power play that's going to span the intermission. And normally that's not that big of a deal, but in the just over 30 seconds of power play that goes into the second or third period, they end up scoring on it. The goal comes in the final seconds of the power play, and it comes off of a back and forth pass between Domi and one of the other guys that's out there. And then Domi just kind of takes a surprise shot off of the net from the faceoff circle, and Jones is screened pretty well in front, never sees the puck until it's in the back of the net behind him. So now it's 6-3, and while a 3-goal lead should still be something you can hold on to, especially against the worst team in the league, yeah, you probably want to have a response to that. And wouldn't you know it, less than a minute later, the Kraken do have a response, as Larson with the puck skates into the offensive zone, drops it for McCann in the corner. McCann skates up to his favorite spot in this game, that right face-off dot, fires off a shot, and puts it perfectly into the top corner to give the Kraken the 7-3 lead, and give McCann the first ever hat trick, not only in his career, but the first ever road hat trick in Seattle Kraken history, and also first one of the season. Second ever, with Eberle having the only one last season. Hey! Let's go! Hey! I will say the one bone that I have to pick with this hat trick is that while I was, or have been, putting together the mid-season review for the Kraken, which I did all the stats cutting it right at the 41 game mark after that Boston game, so this one won't be involved in that when that comes out. Probably maybe sometime this weekend or early next week. One of the things that I'm going to still say in it, because it's still true of the first half of the season, while the Kraken were the third highest scoring team in the league in the first half, they didn't have a single hat trick, which just shows the depth of scoring that this team has, that they can put in that many goals and not have one guy that's carrying the goal scoring even on a single night. And of course, before I can put that video together and point that out, McCann goes and ruins it by getting a hat trick. I'm not that mad though. And I also wasn't that mad when less than a minute later, the Kraken score again. This time it's Oliver Bjorkstrand off of a very nice feed from down in the corner behind the net from Jamie Alexiak of all people, down in the corner fighting for the puck. He gets that pass up to Bjorkstrand, and Bjorkstrand puts it into the back of the net to get his 7th of the season, and I guess in some way make up for having his face cut open earlier on in this game. The Kraken make it 8-2. No, sorry, 8-3. I think I actually did the exact same thing in the tweet about this goal, so I don't know why I wanted it to be 8-2 so bad. I mean, it would be better for the Kraken, but other than that. Anyway, from here, the rest of the third period, much like what happened in the second period, kind of just happens. There's not a lot of urgency from the Kraken, and, well, from the Blackhawks' perspective, yeah, Connor Bedard is that good, so I guess not a lot of urgency for them either, as this really completes the goal of both teams. The Kraken get points in the standings, and the Blackhawks get, well, not points towards getting Bedard. Which I suppose, as far as that's concerned, this is actually a win-win for the Kraken, because, again, not only do they get the win, but they also get the Blackhawks closer to Bedard, which means that it's less likely for teams in their division to get him, which the Sharks and Ducks are making pretty interesting, and the Canucks are starting to look like they may actually be interested in that race as well. Yes, the Blackhawks do end up having 2 more goals in this game towards the end of the third period, where they get another power play and another power play goal, so not a very good night for the Kraken penalty kill, which, at least to me, had been having a pretty good road trip up until this game, so bit of a step backwards, and hopefully that isn't a sign of things to come. And then they also get another goal on a really nice pass from, I think it was Domi out net front for Kane, and then Kane's one of the better players in the league. Well, shouldn't say that at this point, but he's been one of the better players in the league for a while, so he scores in the final seconds to make it 5-8. Still, it doesn't really matter. The Kraken win pretty handily. The only unfortunate part here, other than, again, the Kraken penalty kill that I just mentioned, is that Alexiak, who did have kind of a tough night, was on the ice for all 5 of the Chicago goals. But he did have the one really nice pass to Bjorkstrand for the 8th Kraken goal, so, I mean, at least gets a 1 back. But again, in the end for the Kraken as a whole, it was a pretty good game. I mean, they score 8 goals, which is certainly something you'll take. There were a lot of things that they would probably like to clean up, especially when they take on Tampa Bay here in a couple nights for their first home game in a couple weeks. But again, it's the end of a couple week-long road trip, 7 games on the road, so I think some of that can be excused. It was another non-banner night for the special teams, as both go 0-for-2, with the power play not scoring on that double minor and the penalty kill allowing 2 goals on 2 tries to the Blackhawks, who, as well as being the worst team in the league as far as points are concerned, are also not one of the better teams on the power play. But again, the Kraken have played a lot of very good power plays and stood up to that over this road trip, so let's just excuse it for now. Also, wasn't the best game for Jones, but again, he's coming off of back-to-back shutouts, so we'll also give him one, especially when the Kraken put up 8 on the board and make a lot of it meaningless with 6 of those in the first period. Which, by the way, since I didn't mention it among all the NHL records and stuff that set, is also easily a franchise record. Actually, I think they did score 5 in one period against the Kings, so maybe not quite easily, but it's a franchise record. 6 goals in a single period for the Kraken. Actually, speaking of NHL records, or at least things that haven't happened in the NHL for a long time, Adam Larsson tonight ends up going +7, which I know, again, we've mentioned plus minus not the best stat in the world, except for when you can have some fun with it. And Larsson being a +7 tonight is the first player since 2003 to do that in a single game. And just the 53rd ever, which should neatly lead into the 3 stars of this game, as I don't want to run this one on too much longer. The first star, it's going to be Jared McCann, obviously his first career hat trick, as we said, first hat trick of the season for the Kraken, and their first ever road hat trick. So yeah, 3-goal night for McCann. He didn't really have to, I shouldn't say he didn't have to work too hard, but he fired all 3 shots off from pretty much the same location, and well, he's got a heck of a shot and they all went in. The second star probably should be Matty Beniers with a goal and an assist. It could also definitely be Alex Wimberg with 2 assists or Yanni Gord with 2 assists. But instead, I'm going to give both the second and third stars to 2 guys who only had 1 point, both with 1 assist on the night. And that is that pairing of Dunn and Larsson. And this doesn't really have anything to do with Dunn being a +6 and Larsson being a +7. Again, I don't put a ton of weight in plus minus. Maybe a little bit when it's that much of an outlier, but in general, not that much. Even outside of that, both of these guys were setting up plays all over the ice all night long, getting breakouts from deep in their end to start them through the neutral zone that would end up leading to goals, playing pretty well in the defensive end to not allow Chicago to have much of any chance when they are on the ice, and just generally playing very, very strong games. And advanced stats also tend to not like plus minus. And as far as those are concerned, they really liked the game that these 2 guys played. And even beyond that, they've been one of the best defensive pairings in the NHL all season long. For not just their defensive zone play, which has been fantastic from both of them, but also their offensive production, where they might actually be the top scoring defensive pair in the NHL at this point in the season. So yes, I'll forgive you if you want to put especially Beniers as the second or third star in this game, but I really felt like these 2 guys were due to have it together, and especially when they have as good a game as they did together in this one, now seemed like as good a time as any, and plus Beniers has been getting enough stars for himself, and I think is probably going to get plenty more. With all of that having been said, and again, there could be plenty of other honorable mentions in this game, as I mentioned, by the 13-minute mark, or I guess 13 and 11-second mark of the first period, every Kraken forward had a point, so you could pick all sorts of guys to get stars and honorable mentions in that. And I'd love to hear who you pick as your 3 stars in the comment section down below. I do think we're going to start to close this one out, as it's probably gone on pretty long again. 13 goals, I think you can forgive me for that. And yeah, I'm sure I forgot some things, so with everything going on in this game, there has to have been something I forgot. Let me know down in the comment section what that was. And until the first home game that we've had in a while against the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is a 1 o'clock game on Monday, so don't wait until 7 o'clock waiting for the game. At that point, you may have already missed the rerun on Root Sports of it. So yeah, 1 p.m. at home. Hopefully you'll see you then. And until then, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. Help support the channel. Stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless and go Kraken!